So my name is Jessica Walker, and I'm very proud to be the Deputy Principal of Yeronga State High School, but also I'm a Queensland Teachers Union rep in my school, and I have been for a number of years. And I'm co-convener of a group called Teachers for Refugees and People Seeking Asylum. And I'm also what's called the Free Mojgan Movement Coordinator. And I'm going to be talking with you a bit today about my journey over the last 12 months as I've been forced to think about what freedom means to me as a professional. And if I believe Martin Luther King Jr., and I do, when he says it is always the right time to do what is right, well, over the last 12 months I've had to really examine, well, what is the right thing for me to do? I'm a person who's impassioned and empowered to teach. What is the right thing for me to do in my context when faced with certain issues? So my school, just to give you that little context update again, it's in Brisbane. It's quite close to the city. We have about 740 students, and we're known as a Phase 2 EALD school. So EALD stands for English as Additional Language or Dialect. So when students come new from as refugees or as immigrants to Australia, to Brisbane, they go to a reception centre first where they get really basic English language instruction, and then they come to us for the next step. So in our school population, over 400 students fit the label of EALD. And as you heard before, they come from 60 countries and have 65 different distinct cultural groups. And of all of the students, over 50% have refugee backgrounds or are young people seeking asylum in our country. Now, our kind of core belief at Yeronga is that every student has quality pathways to success, that every student can get to where they want to go if they have motivation and the support and the resources to do so. And that's something that we've really tried to embed in the culture of our school over the last 10 years. And we've got these values: quality, harmony, sustainability. And we talk about, particularly our leadership, talk all the time about having high expectations in a context of social justice. So that has been something that has been really important to us as an identity for the last 10 years. And you can see, you're not going to be able to see all the countries, but that gives you an idea of the diversity. And it's amazing working with these young people and all the value they bring into our school environment, their life experiences, their journey, their understanding of the world, their sense of humour. It's just an incredibly dynamic and inspiring place to work. So why am I standing here talking to you about freedom? Well, over the last few years, it's become very apparent that not all of our students in our school community have the same freedoms. And when we believe that quality pathways to success is possible, and yet we're facing something that is clearly limiting young people and taking their human rights away, how do you walk that line? So we had, in 2012, there was a change of policy. It used to be that if young people arrived seeking asylum with their families, or sometimes as unaccompanied minors, of which we've got many, if they arrived before August 13, 2012, and their cases were processed, yes, you have a refugee background, yes, your claim for asylum is legitimate, they were given permanent residency visas and they were able to settle in Australia. So no issue, great. We could welcome those students. They had every opportunity available to them that any Australian citizen would have. But when the law changed, the government said, well, after 13th of August 2012, any young person, any person arriving in Australia by boat can never be recognised as a refugee, can never have that status in Australia. And even when their case for asylum is processed as being legitimate and the people go, yes, yes, you do have refugee background, they still will not ever be recognised as refugees. And why was this change brought about? Well, it became political. It became about getting votes. And stop the boats, stop the people smugglers. We're going to be hard on people seeking asylum because that will stop people from getting in boats and will stop deaths at sea. That's the logic that the government used to introduce this law, and the logic they still stick with today. And our government was telling us, state and federal, that we had to call these young people who are in our schools seeking asylum as illegal maritime arrivals. They reduced them to an acronym, IMAs. That you'll get IMA funding for these students. This is what you need to call these students. And in communications coming from the Education Department and coming from federal government, it was using this awful term, IMA. So as a school community, I said to my leadership staff, we're not doing that. We're not going to start calling people illegals, and we're not going to start using this awful acronym and trying to... We'll call these young people when we need to call them anything. If we need to refer to them that way, we'll call them people seeking asylum. Because language is power, and that's who they are. They are people seeking asylum. And there isn't anything illegal about that.
And so that was the first, I guess, tiny step in me speaking out about something. And every time I went to anything around EALD and talking about funding and all the rest of it, I refused to use that term. And when other people did, I'd pull them up and say, hang on, I'm an educator, that's not the term I'm not using that term. If you want to talk to me about these young people, we'll talk about people seeking asylum. None of this illegal nonsense. So the policy now for these young people who've arrived after that date is if they arrive by boat, they are mandatorily detained. So they all go to a detention centre. Now this happened before as well, but the stay in the detention centre was short, and once the claim for asylum was processed, they were given a permanent residency visa and they were in the community. Now it was a much longer process. So detention centre on Christmas Island, which as you can see on the map there, is way off to the northwestern coast of Australia. And that's pretty much like a prison. Then after that initial screening, young people and their families are transferred to detention centres in a capital city. And there are centres in every capital city, including Brisbane. By the time young people came to us in our school, they'd often been to a detention centre, Christmas Island, detention centre in Perth, detention centre in Darwin, and then to Brisbane, or sometimes to Melbourne. If they were unaccompanied minors, sometimes they'd been to Tasmania and then sent to Brisbane. So there was a lot of transition before they finally came to our school where they could access education. Now, the case for asylum is processed, and they're usually, after they've been released from the detention centre, they're put into community detention. So they're still in a form of prison where they're being watched, their parents can't work, their parents can't access any kind of education. They can do a 6-week English course and that's it. They can't get social security or any benefits like that, so they're essentially in a prison in the community. And young people are coming to school. We also have young people who are coming to school directly from the detention centre in Brisbane. So armed guard every day, their parents have to stay in that facility. They're bussed out to school, then bussed back. And after community detention, there's 2 pathways. They both get bridging visas. One is, yes, you have a valid claim. Yes, you are seeking asylum and it would be dangerous to send you back to your country. So we can look at a temporary protection visa or a safe haven visa, which lasts 3 to 5 years each. So no stability. For a young person who's 12, 13, 14, they've still got no stability in their lives. The other pathway is if the government has decided, or the Department of Immigration and Border Protection, decide that the claim is not valid. They say, no, the circumstances by which you've come to be in Australia are not valid. You are not a person seeking asylum. Therefore, you must return to your country of origin. Now, we've got a large population of people who have fled Iran and who have come seeking asylum by boat, and they say it's too dangerous for me to return. If I go back to Iran, I'll be arrested. And the government continues to say, well, no, we believe you can go back. However, Iran has said they will not accept anybody who doesn't want to come back. So people can't be forcefully deported, which means these people are left in indefinite incarceration. They've not committed a crime. They've not gone to a court. They've not been charged with anything, but they're being kept in prisons in Australia. Why is it that I know so much? And believe me, I could go on for ages about this stuff and about the policy and the laws and the ins and outs of it. How is it that I know this as a deputy principal in a high school? Well, I'd like you to meet one of our students, Mojgan Shamsalipur. Mojgan arrived at our high school in Year 10. She stayed there from Year 10 until midway through Year 12, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment. But she arrived in Australia by herself. She came, she didn't have a parent with her. She came with her older brother. She fled Iran after being raped by her stepfather and a family friend. She was going to be forced into marriage with a man in his late 50s, early 60s. And her brother defended Mojgan and the things that had happened to her, and as a result of the actions that he took, his life was also in danger. So together they came to Australia. Now, Mojgan, when she came, no one knew that personal trauma had happened to her. She didn't talk about it when she first came to Australia. She gave domestic violence reasons for why she fled. She said her stepfather had beaten her, but she didn't go into all the details of what had occurred. And in Iran, women don't talk about sexual violence or rape, and she was still highly traumatised. She was suffering post-traumatic stress disorder. She was having regular counselling. She was clearly a young woman in distress when she came to our school. And I could see, though, that she really valued her education. That's the thing that I really remember. I enrolled her at our school, and she just spoke to me about how much she believed in education, how desperately she wanted to finish her high schooling, how she wanted to go to university and become a midwife. And so she came into our school into year 10, and over time she started to heal. The stability that school provided her, she became involved in performing arts as an actress, and also in dance, which she loved, and she made friends. She was living in the community on a bridging visa. So her claim for asylum was still being processed, and she was going through that process while she was with us. Part of Mojgan's story is too that she fell in love. So she was 19 when she met Millard. Now Millard had also been a student at our school, lovely young man. He arrived in Australia seeking asylum by boat, but before that date in August. So his family was seeking asylum as a result of their political ties in Iran, and the reasons they had to flee were around that. And he was given permanent residency, and I've just finished filling in his Australian citizenship paperwork last week. So he's on his way to become a citizen. There you can see Mojgan and Millard together with Millard's parents and his younger brother. And they met at a youth camp in 2012, and then they got married in 2014. This was at the end of year 11 for Mojgan. So October 2014 was looking pretty good for her. We had really, we thought that her case for asylum was going to be accepted and she'd be able to stay, even though it would be under those temporary visa arrangements. We still knew she had a good future because she was married to Millard. Life was looking up. And then, 2014, December, Mojgan's case for asylum was rejected. She was told that the circumstances under which she fled and the fact that she didn't disclose all the details of her rape and being forced to marriage meant that she couldn't be considered as having a legitimate claim for asylum. So she was put back into a detention centre in Brisbane, and she was forced to be imprisoned there. And then we petitioned as a school. I went to the Department of Immigration. I said, this is ridiculous. This is a young woman committed to her studies. She should be able to be here. And so she was allowed day release to come to school and to start her studies. Under armed guard, she'd be searched when she got to school. She was treated like a criminal. The guards, were just horribly disrespectful to her, yelled at her sometimes for perceived transgressions against the rules. And I wanted to complain about that. But Mojgan pleaded with me and said, please don't, because maybe they'll stop me coming to school. And things are already bad enough, just let me keep coming to school. That's all I want to do. So I didn't say anything. Then on the 7th of August, 3 months away from finishing year 12, Mojgan was forcibly transferred to Darwin, and by forcibly I mean force was used. Her hands were put in a lock behind her back. She was dragged along the ground. She was incredibly distressed. She wasn't allowed to tell anybody what was happening, and there was no warning, and there was no reason ever given other than operational reasons. Now that morning she'd called me and I'd missed the call, and she'd left a message on my phone saying, "Miss, I'm really scared. They're not letting anybody go to school today," because there were other young people who were going to the reception language school as well. They weren't letting anyone out. And when she was removed like that, our school community was just shocked. We could not believe that had happened. That her, so little respect was shown for our school community, so little respect shown for her education, that she could be treated that way. And we said, well, enough's enough. And I went to we called an emergency staff meeting, and I said, it's time, we need to speak out about this, because if we don't, what have we gained by saying nothing? We were quiet, we played the game, we didn't protest, we let this continue, and what's happened? She's been treated like this. So we decided it was time for us to speak out. And this is the result of speaking out. This is a rally that was held for Mojgan outside Parliament in Brisbane. And our union, we went to our teachers' union and said, help us organise this. This was 1 week after she'd been removed. And a huge amount of people turned out. People in our school community, teachers, but also other people, refugee rights groups, other activists. And we felt like we were doing something. But also our students, in our school stepping forward, and in me saying, yes, we're not going to be quiet about this, we're going to speak out about this, our students were empowered to speak out. Our young people were just horrified that one of their friends, one of their year 12 peers, could be taken away like that. And we've got here our 2 school captains, Denise and Eden. They came to every rally and they spoke very passionately about why this was so wrong and how could Australia do this. it's changed their lives. Eden, who was going to go to university and do a business degree, has decided to do journalism and also social justice studies. So she really felt very strongly about this. She wants to change the world and make it better. And in empowering our students, we taught them so much. And I feel much better about our future knowing that we've got young people who are willing to speak out. And we also empowered our teachers to take industrial action. So our teachers we had a strike from work. We stopped work. There was an industrial action, and after a lot of toing and froing, our employer decided not to dock our pay, and they allowed us to take this action and still be paid. And we had a huge rally outside of our school. We had a lot of press around it. Millard came to speak, and then over in the park across the road, we had more people coming. So our school community and broader community learned so much about what was happening to young people seeking asylum in general, and refugees in our country. And since that day that Mojgan has been taken, I've basically taken every opportunity I can to spread the message. And I'm fortunate because Mojgan has said to me, tell my story. Let my story be heard. Whereas other young people at my school, I can't talk about them and their story because they can't give consent, and their parents are scared and they don't want anybody to talk publicly about them. But Mojgan is different because she really feels that this life that she's been given and the things that she's had to go through, it has to mean something. And if that something is telling people about her story and spurring people to action and to have more compassion and to question their government and the way they treat people seeking asylum, then everything that she's gone through has been worth it. And so through that, I've bet these are politicians you can see there. There's Millard, her husband, and I doing ABC radio interviews. It's us at the Ministers for Immigration trying to give him a letter, but he was a coward, hid in his office, wouldn't come out. Down in Sydney, we spoke there too, and I have a Free Mojgan Facebook page that has over 3,000 likes now with people, invested in this story, wanting to know what's happening to this young woman. In terms of our acknowledgement through the unions, so in the union movement's very strong in Queensland, and our regional industrial action was awarded at the Labor Day Awards, so we had an even broader audience seeing what we're doing and hearing this story about Mojgan. And then we also had our Teachers for Refugees and People Seeking Asylum, which was something that was in the works anyway, but it was galvanised by this issue with Mojgan and speaking up about her. And we've also had politicians speaking about her as well. So in speaking out, it's really spread the story, and lots of people have heard of her story now and, are prepared to speak out about it themselves. And at the end of last year, Mojgan graduated from high school. So we have had success because she's achieved her education, and people know that she's finished her high schooling. They know they haven't beaten her. And then she's been transferred back to Brisbane just this year because the Darwin Detention Centre is now being closed. So there's little things that are happening that tells me that by speaking out, things are going to change. And just last month, we had nationwide awareness raising with Mojgan's story being told on national television in a half-hour documentary. So what comes next? Well, after all the things that we've done and all the ways that we've chosen to speak out about this, what will happen? Well, Mojgan will be released. I know she will. She will create a family with her husband because I believe in that. I believe she'll become a midwife. I believe her story will inspire countless others, and I believe indefinite detention will be ruled illegal in Australia. That is what I believe. So when I come back to the beginning and what I said in the beginning about freedom, what does the word freedom mean? Because if people believe like I believe, and I think they do, that it's always the right time to do what is right, you should not ever be silenced. What is right for you? In whatever context you're in, what can you say? How can you speak out? Because from my experience, only good can come of doing what is right.